Should be able to move now. Just a second. SF5, Abby. I think it's live now. But I still need to... Yeah, it's live. I just need to make it easy for them to access. What do you want today? Lovely stuff. Just let me... I want us to be able to go back to this on YouTube to listen again, if need be. And there will be need to listen again. It's actually quite strange that this is happening. Okay. So YouTube people, I want to know, I think you are good now. You can enjoy. Okay. There, just in case there's some parts we missed, you know, the other stuff. One second. Facebook not low. You know what? I think YouTube is good. We can just work with YouTube and X. Facebook will join us later. It's quite strange. All right, let's go on. Let me read some of those things. One thing I read before, I'm going to read them again. I'm going to read some of those things again. The first general election under the premiership of Akintola took place on 8th August 1960. The AG did exceedingly well at the election. For the first time, the party won 50% of the seats in the Midwest zone of the region, now known as Bendel State. This is huge because back in the early 50s, the NCNC controlled more than 70% of the seats in the Midwest, right? So we're talking 21 out of 24. So that's 1/8. That's 7/8, right? That's 7/8 of all the people in that axis, right? So this is the first time they're having 50%, and it was a huge stuff. As SLA had no stomach for the non-Yoruba elements of the region and had never previously done any political work or campaigning in the area, I took charge of the Midwest before and during the electioneering campaign. It was agreed before polling day that after the close of polls, Akintola would come to my house so that we might hear the results together. I expected him, but he did not turn up. About 10 o'clock that night, he rang up from Ogumosho to say that some Oshun leaders insisted on staying with him in his house at Ogumosho to listen to the results. However, he would come the following day for lunch. I should expect him about 12 noon. It was the incurable habit of SLA to be late for any appointment. Once we were invited to dinner at Government House by Sir John Rankin, Governor of the Western Region. SLA was then the AG leader of opposition in the House of Representatives. We had just finished the last course of a 4-course meal when he arrived, so I did not expect him to arrive until 2 p.m., giving him 2 hours of grace. He actually turned up about 2:30. He was full of apologies. In the morning, he explained, a large crowd had suddenly swooped upon him at Ogumosho and insisted on going to Ibadan with him in a motorcade. And at the approaches to Ibadan, another large crowd had waited to give him a triumphant welcome to Ibadan. I thought it was odd that a triumphant entry into Ibadan could be arranged for him by members of the party without my knowledge. I should be the one to lead the victory procession with him on my side. Surely that would have been more impressive. He assured me that all the arrangements at Ogbomoso and Ibadan had been made without his previous knowledge. SLA sat down as if to have a meal, but instead he said that he was in a hurry to keep an appointment with the governor for 2 o'clock. I expressed surprise and the hope that he was not being invited to form a new government. "Oh no," he said. The governor, Sir Adesoji Aderemi, the then Ooni of Ife, had rung up very early in the morning to congratulate him and to request that on his arrival in Ibadan, he might call so that he, the governor, might congratulate him in person. At that time, he had thought he would be with me even before 12 noon, and that after lunch, he would call on the governor. He therefore gave him 2 o'clock, which was agreed. So, hurriedly, he left my place. At the 3 o'clock news, Emagbo. At the 3 o'clock news, sorry, I'm trying to restart one of those devices. So he said he was going to see Oni, who was the governor of the Western region, but he was in Ibadan. I was going to go see him, right? And that's the reason he was not staying in Papa's house, because he had to, run along. Anyway, so hurriedly, he left my place. At the 3 o'clock news on the NBC, Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, it was announced that Chief SL Akintola had visited the governor and that the latter had called upon him to form a new government. Contrary to what Awolowo said, Akintola said. It was an established practice in the AG for the leader of the party, after a general election, to summon a meeting of the caucus of party leaders to consider and approve the names of persons recommended for appointment as ministers. This was done when I was leader of the party in power and premier in 1951 and 1956 respectively. In those days, when a premier was called upon to form a new government, all the incumbent ministers were deemed, from the moment the announcement was made, to have surrendered their respective portfolios and vacated their ministries in order to prevent a vacuum. What I did in 1956 after the general election was to meet with the party caucus, which included Akintola, for a consideration and approval of my nominees for ministerial appointments. After this had been done, I then went to the governor to request him to call upon me to form a new government. And immediately he did so, I submitted the names of my ministers to him, who were immediately appointed. In other words, there is a process before you form the government, which would include having the people that you want to serve with you as ministers. And then even that would be determined by the party caucus, and then there will be no vacuum, right, in the transition of power, right? So he says that's what they usually did in the AG. However, in the present case, the caucus had not even been assembled nor summoned to meet. It was clear that Akintola had hurried out of my presence so that we might not hear the 3 o'clock news together. It was undeniably clear that he had visited the governor and given him a list of his ministers before coming to my place. And I had no doubt that both the Ogbomoso and Ibadan processions had been carefully planned with his full knowledge and consent. He did not want me around because my presence might steal the show. He called on me the following day in the afternoon, but again he was in a hurry to go back to his house to receive the commissioner of police. Why did he not finish with the commissioner before coming to me? The answer was that he had other important engagements for the rest of the day, but felt obliged to call on me to explain what had happened the previous day. He explained that he had not previously asked the governor to call upon him to form a new government, but when he was at the government house for the prearranged courtesy visit, the governor said he wanted to call upon him to form a new government. As he did not want to appear to be rude, he agreed. I told him to tell that story to the Marines. He had made a serious and very reprehensible departure from party procedure of holding proper detailed consultations with certain party leaders before tendering advice to the governor to invite him to form a new government. Besides, I thought he had deliberately deceived me all the way. He apologized profusely. This was on 10th August 1960. That's about 7 months after I became premier. In the meantime, on hearing the news on 9th August 1960, I had summoned a meeting of the caucus for 9 a.m. on the 11th. I told SLA of this and he agreed. One second, please. All right. I think you should, I just want to be sure YouTube is good. I think it's fine. One second. I just want to make sure that folks on Facebook are also good. Ẹkáàbọ Ronkenimbe. Good to see you. I just want to, reconnect Facebook. The device is good now. Take me like a couple of, I was going to say a couple of seconds, but one to wait, couple years to 1, 2. If on YouTube, we have somebody called Gaming Wheat Mixer. Hello, good to see you. Okay, I think we're good. YouTube is fine, so just work with what we have. There's X here. Oh, down. Okay, so let's get back to the book. So you're already seeing some of the intrigues. So Papa says, in the meantime, on hearing the news on 9th August 1960, I had summoned a meeting of the Caucus for 9 a.m. on the 11th. I told SLA of this and he agreed. He, however, gave me one of the shocks of my life when he informed me that in order to prevent a vacuum in the administration, he had already submitted to the governor a list of the new ministers, that he had in fact informed the ministers concerned, and that subject to the approval of the caucus, the ministers might be sworn in later on the morning of 11th August. It then dawned on me that SLA was determined to run the show alone, regardless of accepted party conventions and procedures. I'll tell that again. It then dawned on me that SLA was determined to run the show alone, regardless of accepted party conventions and procedure. I felt, therefore, that in the prevailing circumstances, the best attitude to adopt was to allow him to have his way in matters of conventions and procedure. Accordingly, I told him that after the swearing-in ceremony, I would like all the new ministers to retire to my house so that I might congratulate them and give them a brief outline of our code of conduct. The following day, SLA arrived at the meeting about 9:30. Those present apart from SLA himself were Chief Anthony Naoro, Chief Ayotunde Rosiji, Mr. Alfred Riwani, Chief S.O. Gbadamosi, and Chief S.O. Shonibare. Akintola submitted a list of his ministers. It was a tumultuous crowd. There were objections to the number, but whom to take out? An exercise in this connection was bound to create bad blood, since according to SLA, those concerned had been informed contrary to previous practice. Minister Caucus. The situation in which we found ourselves gave the opportunity to some members to add 2 or 3 other nominees. As far as SLA was concerned, the number did not matter. I then suggested that in order to have a manageable crowd at the cabinet meeting, he could divide the ministers into 2 groups, some of cabinet rank, others of non-cabinet rank. After some discussion, we agreed to this arrangement. But after a short while, indeed within the week, this decision was revoked. Akintola had informed those that were excluded from cabinet meetings that the caucus and I had been responsible for the discrimination against them. I convened another meeting. There, he declared that the number of ministers at cabinet meeting did not at all matter to him, and he emphasized this point by asserting, the more, the merrier. So we all succumbed, and SLA became the undisputed hero of his incumbent ministers and of new aspirants as well. After the swearing-in ceremony, the ministers retired to my place as arranged. Those who attended the caucus meeting earlier in the morning were still with me. From this point, I would like to allow the records which I kept from time to time as the events took place to speak for themselves, interspersed with comments where necessary. We're about to dive into Papa's diary. I hope we are ready. Let's go. 11th August 1960. I opened by saying that the purpose of the meeting was dual. to congratulate the new ministers and to impress upon them the need to observe the party's well-known code of conduct. In the latter connection, SOG pointed out, by the way, SOG is Esuk Badamosi. SOG, that's Alhaji Esuk Badamosi, who was quite close to SLA, having been taught by SLA while he was in school in Baptist Academy. In the latter connection, SOG pointed out that he had learned that some of the newly appointed ministers who served in the outgoing administration had since January last violated the party's code that ministers should not own crown lands. SLA was indignant and declared that he ruled the point out of order. I pointed out that so long as I was in the chair, it was not within his competence to rule any point out of order. I declared that the issue of crown lands was a fit subject for discussion, and insisted that ministers who already had crown lands allocated to them should return them forthwith. After a fairly lengthy discussion, it was decided that a minister should be allowed to own only one plot of crown land. As will be seen, the meeting became somewhat acrimonious and ended on an unpalatable note. After my departure from the regional government, SLA had obviously given a lot of indulgence and laxity to his ministers in order to win their loyalty to himself. It is, for instance, significant that all the ministers who worked with me, with the exception of a very frugal person, Obasidi Akran, and someone who had other sources of income, Chief Odunjo, had very small credit balances in their bank accounts. In fact, at the Shomolu probe, it was disclosed in evidence that all those who had worked with me and were later appointed into SLA's cabinet were either in the red or had very small credit balances in the banks as at 31st December. They had become very affluent. In fact, when the coup occurred in January 1966, Obasidi Akran had become so contaminated by his close association with SLA that he had accumulated about £500,000 as cash in hand, locked up in a coffin in his house at Badagry. Dr. S.D. Onobamiro, Akintola's Minister of Education and the star witness at the treasonable felony trial, was convicted and sentenced to prison for stealing a sum of money, the property of the Western Nigeria Marketing Board. That's from 1968. What is Crown Land? I think it's land. I think it's colonial. I think it's let me check. But I think it's land that belongs to the colonial government. Because whenever they use crown in those documents, they're talking about the British monarchy. But let me check, just to be sure. Like Ikoyi, something like that. I was right. So crown land referred to land owned by the British colonial government, held in the name of the British crown. That's the name of the monarchy. So ilẹ̀ tó jẹ́ tiwọn. Okay. So it is the land that's claimed as the property of the crown, that is the British monarch. This land was managed by the colonial government and used for official, administrative or economic purposes such as government buildings and so on and so forth. And yes, Ikoyi will be a very good example. Marina, Victoria Island were designated as crown lands. Okay, so I think we have that. You have watched too much Toluwa Nile. It's not Ile Osha, it's Ile colonial government. In my mind, I'm thinking maybe the reason they're saying not to have that would be that they could be contaminated or they will have divided loyalty because now they would have to answer to the federal government, or to the center, the government at the center. That would be one plot each. In other words, there were native land and then there was crown land. Native land was under the traditional authorities or indigenous systems subject to colonial oversight, but crown land was under direct colonial control. But now we don't use any of those things anymore. We use Land Use Act of 1978, which puts all the land under the governor of the state. Right. So yeah, that's information that we have there. Let's get back into this. 31st, I hope I answered that question. So it talks about land belonging to the colonial government. 31st August 1960, Chief Akintola informed me that the marketing board, this one is actually quite crazy. Chief Akintola informed me that the marketing board had proposed a reduction in the price of cocoa for the coming season. I really need to read something before I read this one. One second. You see, in a way, also we pay cocoa yen. I need to read it so that we can understand we can connect. We'll connect it when we read everything together. Okay. So it says in this book, that's Akintola. It says, after removing the taxes, and then Akintola also reduced the tax paid by those who were not under the payee, that's pay as you earn, thus granting relief to farmers who had suffered considerable diminution of their income because of the fall in the world market price of cocoa and the consequent reduction in the local purchase price paid by the marketing board. During his first administration, his government had also been, granting relief to farmers who had suffered considerable diminution of their income because of the fall in the world market price of cocoa. They did not suffer considerable diminution just because of the fall in the world market price of cocoa. Something happened before then. What happened before then, we'll see it in this book. Now let's go back to the book. But let me finish it. It said, granting relief to farmers who had suffered considerable diminution of their income because of the fall in the world market price of cocoa and the consequent reduction in local purchase price paid by the marketing board. That's a very good explanation, but doesn't really give us everything that we need. So let's read the other one to find the other bit that we don't have in the other. Akintola informed me that the marketing board had proposed a reduction in the price of cocoa for the coming season. He said that he did not favor a reduction for the reason that even if the anticipated fall in let me read it slowly. Chief Akintola informed me, 31st August 1960. Chief Akintola informed me that the marketing board had proposed a reduction in the price of cocoa for the coming season. He said that he did not favor a reduction for the reason that even if the anticipated fall in cocoa price occurred, the finances of the marketing board could cope with the situation. All the same, he would like to have my opinion. I supported his view. I reminded him that apart from others of his ministers, he himself had eloquently denied during the electioneering campaign the allegation made by Chief Fani Kayode, then of the NTNC, that he, Kayode, had it on good authority that the AG would reduce the price of cocoa if it was returned to power. Therefore, to reduce the price of cocoa as proposed would for the first time in the history of the party portray us to the electorate as deliberate liars and deceivers. It will, I think, make for a better understanding to relate in juxtaposition what happened in January 1961, even though this means jumping an important event in September 1960, to which we shall return in due course. 12 January 1961. Chief Akintola saw me at Ikena about 4:30 p.m. When making the appointment in the morning, he had told me that there was an important matter on which he wanted to consult me. During our discussion, he said that it had become necessary that the price of cocoa should be reduced before the end of the season. In tendering advice to him on the matter, he continued, the marketing board had pointed out that it would incur a loss of more than £500,000 if a cut was not made without delay. A reduced price of £110 had been suggested by the board, but he thought that was too low. In answer to a question from me, he said that the marketing board could easily find a price subsidy of £500,000 subsidy. I raised 5 grounds of objection. Number 1, having fixed a price for the whole season, it would be a gross breach of faith on the part, I'll explain. It would be a gross breach of faith on the part of the government to reduce the price mid-season. Number 2, it would be the first time since 1945 or so when the price of cocoa was reduced mid-season. It would shock cocoa producers, and they would be wondering whether we were as good on the marketing of their produce as our former colonial masters, who gave them a stable and unaltered price every season for about 11 years before we took over produce marketing in 1954. Number 3, a mid-season cut in price would work injustice against those farmers who, relying on the guaranteed price for the whole season, had decided not to sell their produce by installment, but to wait until their entire crops had been harvested, when they could sell in bulk and apply their income to some cherished projects. It would also work on fairness on those farmers whose crops were late for harvest. Number 4. Furthermore, it would be impossible for the marketing board to cut its loss as it had imagined by mid-season cuts in price. Many produce buyers would like to take advantage of the lower price by making a declaration of stock which they did not have at the time the cut was announced, but which they knew they could make up soon afterwards by buying not at the new price but at something less than £160, say at £140 per ton, for instance, instead of at £110. They would attract many sellers at this price and make £20 profit per ton. And if £500,000 was all the loss that was anticipated if the existing price was maintained, it appeared to me in the circumstances unwise to reduce the price, even if the loss was going to be much more than £500,000. I was still of the opinion that the marketing board should bear it. Let me explain. So what this means basically is this. Every season, the marketing board would tell the cocoa farmers what price they would buy their produce in that season. So for instance, they could say something like, okay, Lord doing you going to buy it for £150 or something. Now here's the thing. The way it works is that no matter what happens in the market, you should still pay them that money because they are working with it. Some of the reasons that I will give you that Papa mentioned, for instance, that a person who had harvested but didn't bring his produce because he's waiting to have it in bulk. Or whatever he wants to do with his money. He's trying to sell everything in bulk. Already priced the government is of season. At the beginning of the season, the government already assured them that, guys, we are buying this thing from you at this price. If because of what's happening in the national market, you now decide to reduce it, it's going to affect them. That's what I was saying. So he's saying that the Western region should bear the cost because you have already promised these people that they should just bring it. They don't have to look for a way to sell it by themselves. You will buy it because, of course, the way it worked is that when you purchase it, you make money off of it, right? When the difference between your cost price and your selling price, of course, is your profit. So apparently, he's saying that the Western region should bear that burden, right, of the so that by the next season, they can now say, okay, and last year the price has fallen in the international market, but you can't just reduce the price mid-season so that you don't affect the farmers. I hope you get it. So Awolowo was talking on behalf of the people, of the farmers, and that if you reduce the price during the mid-season, it's going to affect the plans that they must have had for themselves. All right. Chief Akintola said he was impressed by my argument. He looked at his wristwatch. It was then about 5:30 p.m. and he said he was in a hurry to keep another important appointment in Ibadan, which had been fixed for 6 p.m. We agreed that on my return to Ibadan, I was due back the following evening. We would, if necessary, examine the problem further, and in such circumstances, it would make all the marketing board memoranda on the matter available to me for study and comments. He finally left me by 5:45 p.m. At 6 p.m., it was announced on the NBC News that the Premier of the Western region was going to hold an important press conference at 10 a.m. the following day. On hearing this news and remembering an analogous incident, I suspected that Chief Akintola had deliberately hurried out of my presence in time before his proposed press conference was announced. If he had been present when the news came through, I would have asked questions. However, at his press conference on 13th January 1961, Chief Akintola announced the new prices for the rest of the cocoa season. Under the new arrangement, the price of grade 1 main crop or light crop was reduced from £160 to £112, and of grade 2 main or light crop from £145 to £110 per ton. The measure led to confusion among producers as well as licensed buying agents. As has been seen above, Akintola had anticipated a £500,000 loss, which he had expected to obviate by a reduction in price. But the loss incurred that year by the marketing board was £1,189,610. There were allegations of failure of miscarriage of the plans to effect a revision of the producer prices. In consequence, Mr. Justice V.A. Delumo was appointed sole commissioner to inquire into the allegations. September 1960. The FEC, Federal Executive Council of the Action Group, at its Ikeja meeting, set up an ideological committee consisting of Dr. S.D. Onobamiro, Ayo Kushaga, W. Briggs, and S.G. Koku. They were to consider what the ideology of the party should be in an independent Nigeria. They were to submit their report on 20th September 1960. Decision was also taken at this meeting, empowering me to set up a tactical committee. 20th September 1960. After a prolonged debate which lasted till very late in the night, the FEC or the FEC adopted democratic socialism as the party's ideology and basic policy. The name was suggested by SLA. I like these things, because I read a book where the man was saying that SLA did not believe in it, but apparently he named it. So may God help all of us. Let's continue. The ideals of democratic socialism are epitomized in 11 beliefs as follows. Number 1, we believe in the oneness and equality. Oh boy, these guys were thorough. These guys were thorough. All we have right now is a platform to win elections. May God have mercy on Nigeria. Anyway, let's read. The ideals of democratic socialism are epitomized in 11 beliefs as follows. Number 1, we believe in the oneness and equality of man, which is why you can't be a tribalist. Number 2, we believe in the rule of law. Number 3, we believe in the right of the people freely to choose their representatives on the basis of one citizen, one vote. Number 4, we believe in freedom of thought, expression, assembly, association, and religion. Number 5, we believe in parliamentary democracy. That is the principle of majority rule, subject to the right of the minority to express and propagate their views in the community. Number 6, we believe in a planned economy under which the public sector is run by the state and private sector is open to free enterprise. Number 7, we believe in the provision by the state of social services for the entire people. Number 8, we believe that workers of all grades are entitled to receive the full fruits of their labor. Number 9, we believe in the protection of the interests of self-employed persons and in obtaining for them the greatest possible return for their labor. Number 10, we believe in trade unionism and cooperative movement as major instruments in the development and maintenance of economic progress of Nigeria. Number 11, we believe in cooperation with movements and organizations inside and outside Nigeria whose aims and objects are in harmony with ours. In spite of its offensive nature, Akintola and some leaders of the AG had a strong revulsion against democratic socialism as outlined above. SLA did not hesitate to launch a denigrating, vicious and subtle campaign against it. According to him, it meant, and he stated this to the hearing of some of us, that a man could not have two things at the same time. If you have a cap, you are not entitled to have trousers. It meant one man, one wife, one man, one plot of land. 30th January 30th January to 2nd March 1961. Lecture and campaign tour of the East and Midwest. During this tour, Mr. Eso Ighodaro, now Mr. Justice Ighodaro, spoke to me thrice about the mess in which the finances of the Western region were. He appealed to me on each occasion to help to look into the problem on my return to Ibadan, as Akintola had done nothing about it. Soon after my return to Ibadan, Odebiyi came to me and made a similar appeal. I worked hard on the problem for 2 days and produced a solution. All this was done by me in the absence of Akintola from Ibadan. Unknown to him, I prepared an executive council memo, which Akintola initialed, believing it had been prepared by the officials of his Ministry of Finance. And this was done in order not to do violence to his sense of self-importance as Premier of the region. 15th May 1961. A memo of this date initialed by Akintola seeking permission to negotiate for the takeover of NIPC properties in discharge of debts owed by the latter to the WRMB, that was Western Region Marketing Board, was approved by the Western Region Executive Council. 7 September 1961. A memo of this date initiated by Akintola seeking the concurrence of Cabinet for the takeover of NIPC properties at an expert valuation of £8,942,000 was approved by the Western Region Executive Council. The expert valuer was appointed by Akintola in his capacity as Premier. 22nd September 1961. Chief S.L. Akintola left Nigeria on an economic mission to Europe. When the plan for the mission was disclosed to me, I criticized it on the following grounds. Number one, its timing was wrong in that A, the region was faced with serious financial problems which demanded an immediate solution and which could not be solved by any achievement of the mission. And B, there was a grave threat to law and order in the Midwest. Number two, its composition was unwieldy. Number three, far too many countries were planned to be visited within too comparatively short a time for any effective or useful negotiation to be conducted. The whole thing looked more like a sightseeing spree than an economic mission. Chief Akintola twice deferred his departure on the mission. Earlier in September 1961, during my holiday in the UK, I had a telephone conversation with him. In the course of it, he said he had deferred his departure indefinitely until he had had further discussion with me on my return from the UK. When I returned to Nigeria on 19 September, however, I was faced with a fait accompli. The newspapers of that morning carried an official announcement that Chief Akintola, his wife, and a very large entourage were leaving the country on an economic mission on 22nd September. By the way, I'm trying not to say a lot because I want to just make up your own mind, right? We were telling 9th November 1961. At the Kenya meeting, Chief J.A.O. Odebiyi disclosed that the Western Region government was facing a financial crisis. After a lengthy discussion, it was decided that the Treasury Board should study the situation with a view to devising ways and means. I'll tell you that again. After a lengthy discussion, it was decided that the Treasury Board should study the situation with a view to devising ways and means of bringing the crisis under control. Obasidi Akran, who was acting premier, was present at the meeting, and the decision taken was a suggestion. 18th December 1961, there was a meeting of the party's FPC, that was Federal Executive Council at Ikeja, VIP. Again, party new, AG FEC. There was a meeting of the party's FEC at Ikeja, VIP Rest House. At this meeting, the strains and stresses which had existed for 2 years within the action group broke into the open for the first time. Later in the day, the meeting was adjourned till the following day as a result of the personal intervention of Dr. Akintola Maja, Chief Okukwe, and Alhaji Gbadamosi. At the opening of the FEC, I delivered an address entitled Call to Rededication and Reconstruction. The address was very badly received by Chief Akintola, his ministers, and those other members of the FEC whom he had alienated to his mode of thinking during the past 2 years or so. My right to deliver an address on such occasion was challenged. I quoted precedents and argued that in any case it was a matter within my absolute discretion to deliver an address, written or unwritten, at the opening of the meeting of any organ of the party. After stormy exchanges by members, it was decided that the address should neither be debated nor be formally adopted. The pro-Akintola elements urged that the address should not be published, but they were almost fainted. Sorry, I'll tell you again. The pro-Akintola elements urged that the address should not be published, but they almost fainted when I stated that the copies of it were already in the hands of the radio and press for publication later in the day and on the following day. At this same meeting, the National Reconstruction Committee set up by me submitted papers to the Federal Executive Council on the following: number 1, austerity measures; number 2, economic planning; number 3, democratic socialism. All the papers were heatedly debated, but the unusual heat and hostility displayed towards me and the members of the Reconstruction Committee clearly showed that SLA and his ministers and their supporters had come to the meeting with their minds made up to have a showdown with me and if possible to discredit my leadership once and for all. After a long and acrimonious debate, the paper on economic planning was adopted. The one on democratic socialism was referred to the regional executive committees, whilst the one on austerity measures was deferred indefinitely. 20th December 1961. Peace meeting between me and SLA. It was attended by Dr. Maja, Chief Odutola, Obasidi Akran, Dr. Doherty, SOG, and Alhaji Alegbenro. It was at this meeting that SLA declared, among other things, that the experiment of separating the leadership of the party from the leadership of the government in the Western region had failed. That's what it has always been about. That is, two offices will be reposed in one person, like it was with Awo. Again, I wish Papa never left Western region alone. I wish, but again, hindsight is 2020, isn't it? So it says, well, at the meeting, the peace meeting in December 1961, that SLA declared, among other things, that the experiment of separating the leadership of the party from the leadership of the government in the Western region had failed. I pointed out that since I did not want to go back to the Western region as Premier, it followed from his statement that he desired very much to combine my office as leader with his as Premier. This was the first occasion that SLA gave expression to an ardent desire which he had been nursing for the past 2 years, to wrest the leadership of the AG from me, but which had not materialized. During the previous 2 years, he did not make strenuous, but I'll take that again. During the previous 2 years, he did make strenuous but subtle efforts to achieve his desire. Whenever I was to go on an official visit to any part of the region, which was invariably the Yoruba areas of the region, he had always sent an advance team. The assignment was to apprise the people that the Premier, SL Akintola alias SLA, was on his way there. Since he was coming strictly and only in his capacity as Premier, the people should shout SLA and not Awo, which slogan should be reserved for party visits and occasions only. This device failed. I don't have to explain, I'm sure you get it. 4th January 1962. Dr. Nabamiro, West Minister of Education, announced increases in assumed local contributions in Western Nigeria's secondary grammar schools. The assumed local contributions for boys was raised from £15 to £25 per boy, and that for girls was raised from £10 to £25 per girl. Earlier, the school fees in government secondary grammar schools had been increased to £75 per annum per pupil. All these increases had been made and announced without prior consultation with the party. Accordingly, the party newspapers came out in outright criticism and condemnation of the increases on the grounds that they conflicted with the party's basic policy on education, which was to make education free at all levels, and in the meantime to make it as easy as possible for parents to finance the education of their children at post-primary and post-secondary institutions. 8th January 1962. Because of the outcry of the party's newspapers and of the uncompromising disapproval of the majority of the leaders, SLA was obliged to hold a press conference at which the increases were withdrawn. They were reimposed by him at a later date. 10th January 1962. Agreement for the transfer of NIPC properties to the WRMB was executed. 22nd January 1962. SLA held a press conference at which he announced, number 1, cuts in the salaries of and car advances to ministers and corporation members, and 2, abolition of car basic allowances for ministers and corporation members. He promised to reorganize the machinery for tax collection. None of these measures was implemented. 30th January 1962. A meeting of the Federal Executive Council of the Action Group was held at Jos. Chief Oshutokun. One second. I need to confirm something before I say it. Oshutokun, by the way, was on the side of Akintola. I know what I'm about to say, but before I talk, may I check first? Commander being pay. Perfect. So the book I read earlier, I knew it. I just want to be sure. The book I read earlier by Professor Akintola, that man, Akintola is a professor. This Chief Oshutokun is Chief J.O. Oshutokun. That's his father. I think he was born in 1921. His son was born in 1942. But here's the point I'm trying to make. When you read his book, you have to put it at the back of your mind that his father was for SLA. This is not about whether it was good or bad. That's not the point. It's just to tell you that sometimes, that's BCB. A meeting of the Federal Executive Council of the Action Group was held at Jos. Chief Oshutokun and Honorable Adigun challenged my rights to co-opt some members into the council. I defended my action by making reference to the party's constitution and to generally accepted practices in such matters. I refer to the presence of Prince Adedoyin at the meeting. He had been invited to the meeting by the deputy leader without previous clearance with me. All the same, I was prepared to accommodate him and regard him as duly co-opted. I warned against a repetition of the ugly and barren disputation which occurred at Ikeja on 18th December 1961. My explanation was accepted and the meeting proceeded. A steering committee of the Congress was set up under the chairmanship of Ayotunde Rosiji. 1st February 1962. The deputy leader, Chief S.L. Akintola, got permission from me to leave Jos for Ibadan on what he described as an urgent state matter. He promised to be back on Saturday, 3rd February 1962. He did not specify the nature of the state matter, nor did he disclose to me that he was going there to receive the Sardauna. 2nd February 1962, I delivered my presidential address to the Congress. It was well received. According to newspaper reports, Chief Akintola had gone to Ibadan to welcome the Premier of Northern Nigeria, who had gone there on the invitation of the University College Ibadan to open Sultan Bello Hall. According, by the way, Sultan Bello that we always talk about, that is the Sardauna's grandfather. Okay, he's also the one that came up with the idea of Yoruba people coming from Canaan, Joktan, all those things. He was a fantastic scholar, but he did not write our history well because he didn't ask us. He was just making things up in Sokoto. Anyway, there's a hall named after him in University of Ibadan. So at the time, they were trying to open the hall, and that's why he traveled to Ibadan. But then Akintola left the Action Group Executive Council and then traveled back to Ibadan to go receive the Premier of the Northern Region. The same thing their grandfather did to us. What did I say? What is the same thing they did? Is this the stories? Are you talking about their story? Okay. According to newspaper reports, Chief Akintola had gone to Ibadan to welcome the Premier of Northern Nigeria, who had gone there on the invitation of the University College Ibadan to open Sultan Bello Hall. According to information from the principal, which reached us at Jos, Chief Akintola's presence had embarrassed the University College authorities as he had not been expected. Accordingly, the members attending the Congress were in their private conversations critical of Chief Akintola's conduct for the following reasons. Number one, the Sardauna of Sokoto was not on an official visit to Ibadan. He was invited by the principal of the University College Ibadan to perform the opening ceremony of Sultan Bello Hall. Consequently, it was improper for Chief Akintola to leave the party's Congress to welcome another man's guest in Ibadan. By doing so, he had shown scant respect for the party's highest organ. Number two, the conduct of Chief Akintola made the party an object of ridicule. For while the leader of the party was busy delivering an address which in part condemned the repressive measures being taken against the opposition by the Northern government, his deputy was at the same time demonstrating his tacit approval of such measures by giving the Premier of Northern Region a state welcome, even when the Premier was not on an official visit to Western Nigeria. Number three, there was an implied but clear suggestion in the conduct of Chief Akintola that he rated the Sardauna higher in the order of political hierarchy than his own leader. The photograph of Chief Akintola and the Sardauna of Sokoto also appeared in the papers. Congress attendants were annoyed and wanted to discuss the action of Akintola, which they considered outrageous, provocative, and contemptuous of the Congress. I wrote such discussion out of order and appealed to members to exercise restraint. 3rd February 1962. Debate on the presidential address began. Chief Akintola arrived back in Jos at 3 p.m. and told me that he was too tired and therefore could not attend the afternoon session of the Congress. He was excused. But it came to my notice about midnight that Chief Akintola had decided to leave Jos for Ibadan the following morning on the grounds that, number one, I had raised the issue of national government in my presidential address contrary to the prior agreement between me and him that the issue would not be raised. Number two, he had been attacked by speakers during the debate on the presidential address. Number three, the Congress had decided to proceed with the election of officers contrary to his advice to me on the point. On receiving that report, I sent for Akintola twice to come and see me so that I could give him an explanation on each of the points made by him. Twice he declined my invitation. My voluntary envoys for this purpose were Shoni, Alfred, that's Mr. Alfred Ruwani, and Prince Adedoyin. On his second refusal, I decided not to stand on my right. I took my garments and went to his chalet. This was about 1:30 a.m. on Sunday, 4th February. I most sincerely appealed to and begged him in the names of 1. Our 22-year-old friendship, which might be adversely affected if he carried out his intention. 2. Of the action group to which we all profess loyalty and which would suffer if he left just in the prevailing circumstances. 3. Of the masses of the people of Western Nigeria whom we dedicated ourselves to serve and whose welfare would be seriously endangered if he left just in his present mood. And 4. Of God. I told him I had no wish to enter into any argument with him at that stage, but wanted to assure him that no one had in the open meeting attacked or criticized him. All I had come to do was to beg him, most sincerely, not to leave Jos as he had planned. On our return to Ibadan, there will be plenty of time to discuss his grievances and to give him satisfactory explanations. Chief Akinloye was present. He strongly supported my appeal to Chief Akintola. Chief Rosiji was also present, but did not utter a word. Chief S.O. Shonibare, Alfred Ruwani, and Prince Adedoyin who were with me, did not speak. Chief Akintola spoke briefly. He assured me that he would not leave Jos as planned. 4th February 1962. Very early this morning, I asked Prince Adedoyin to go and see if Akintola was still in Jos. He came back and reported rather crisply, with a touch of humor. Leader, the birds have flown. Chiefs Akintola, Rosiji, and S.A. Tinubu, and Messrs. J.O. Adigun and Duro Ogundiran, and delegates from Osun and Oyo divisions had left Jos by train at 7 a.m. At 10 a.m., I and the remaining party leaders and the delegates attended a Congress Thanksgiving service at the Methodist Church. I'll take that again. At 10 a.m., I and the remaining party leaders and delegates attended a Congress Thanksgiving service at the Methodist Church, Jos. As if the preacher knew what was happening within the AG, the text of his sermon was, "Can two walk together except they be agreed?" Amos 3, verse 3. February 1962. Chief Akintola and his supporters arrived in Ibadan. They were met at the railway station by ministers, obas, and government officials. The crowd shouted "SLA on top" as Chief S.L. Akintola alighted from the train. Those who shouted "Awo" were beaten up by Akintola supporters who were led by Mojid Agbaje. 6th February 1962. Dr. Akinola Maja, Chief T.A. Odutola, and Alhaji Gbadamosi arrived in Jos in a chartered plane to discuss with me issues arising from Akintola's withdrawal from the Congress. It was learned later in the day that Chief Akintola was to have come with these men to Jos, but he was dissuaded from doing so at the last minute by Obasi Diakran and Mrs. Akintola. The withdrawal of SLA from Jos and his refusal to return when appealed to do so by well-meaning Yoruba leaders were regarded by the delegates who remained at the Congress as acts of gross disloyalty and a clear declaration of war against the party. 7th February 1962. Ayoroshiji's letter of resignation from the post of Federal Secretary of the Action Group and his secretary's annual report were rejected by the Congress. A memorandum in which Roshiji had advocated the return of another political party in place of the Action Group was distributed to the delegates at the Congress. New officers of the Congress were elected and the Congress adjourned. Sine die. 8th February 1962. I arrived back in Ibadan. A large crowd turned out to welcome me, but no minister or Oba, other than the Odemo of Ishara, came to welcome me. Who remembers who Odemo of Ishara was? Anybody? Dorothy Odemo Ishara. I've mentioned him a number of times, many times actually. Anyone? This is the kind of question we're going to be asking at Radio Republic game show. Who was the Odemo of Ishara? Obasamla. Akintola, is it Akintola? Which Akintola? I've already mentioned the first name, but you're right. Yeah, that was Obasamla Akintola. Thank you. All right, so that was good. Let's get back to this. We still have to cover some things, though. See our fantastic scholars in the comment section. Okay. You will show your color on Friday. Again, if you want to be part of this stuff, please go to Redomic Global. You find the link. The Linktree link. Please click on that and you'll be able to access the form. You fill the form and they'll get back to you before Friday. I'm trying to rest, but we have I want to read a few pages before we go today. 8th February 1962. I arrived back in Ibadan. A large crowd turned out to welcome me, but no minister or Oba, other than the Odemo of Ishara, came to welcome me. At the Mokola roundabout, I was booed by some people who congregated there in front of the NCNC branch secretariat. GB, yes, that same Oba, who was paid 1 pence annual salary by none other than Akintola. It is well. 9th February 1962. By the way, Oba Akintola also goes way back to NYM in the 1930s. So this were freedom fighters, nationalists. They eventually became the king of Ishara. "9th February 1962. A peace meeting presided over by the Ooni of Ife, supported by some Obas and chiefs, was held at the VIP Rest House, Ibadan. I had insisted that all divisional leaders, ministers, and parliamentary secretaries should be invited to this meeting, in order that they might for once know the truth of the real issues, instead of the lies which Akintola had propagated among many of them. Akintola strongly objected to the presence of these people at the meeting. On my part, I made it clear that I would participate in the meeting only if these people were allowed to attend. After a lot of negotiation, it was agreed by Akintola, and I concurred, after a lot of importunities, that only ministers and parliamentary secretaries should be allowed to attend. Some carefully selected leaders of the party were also allowed to be present. Akintola made his case, which in the main was an attack on his burlesque and caricature of democratic socialism. I made mine and referred to his extreme disloyalty to the party and his intense desire to destroy me and my leadership of the party. In the latter connection, I referred to the campaign in which he had engaged among some members like Ogundiran and Oshutokun, that I was planning a coup against the federal government. The Ooni of Ife was in the chair. The Ooni of Ife, excuse me please. The Ooni of Ife, who was in the chair, ruled that this issue of an allegation of a coup should be deferred for discussion at another meeting. You know that allegation eventually led to the treasonable felony trial that landed Awo in prison in 62 or 63. It was 62. The rumor, that's why sometimes I'm very 63. Thank you, Dr. Badru. Landed in prison in 63. The Coca inquiry, I think, was 62. Then treasonable felony trial. Isn't it crazy that certain people amongst our own were the ones who were talking about the fact that he was planning a coup way back in 62? Togri obala no alango le raye wobe. Tikuli oba pani so le pani. Yes, State of Majesty was 62. Then there was something called Caucus inquiry. It was also 62. And then followed by treasonable felony. A lot of things happened in 62. Anyway, that cool thing, the whole treasonable felony trial thing was also something that we ourselves, people from amongst us were already pushing way back in 62. That's to say that it becomes easier for the enemy outside to do what they want to do amongst you if you are not even united within yourselves, which is why we're having this conversation, not because we're trying to say one person is bad, one person is good, but just to say that we come and real at the record to say lolo by Colomba power temole. A boy no can't better going mama saw in bo looking for a way to discredit that person. Let me even stop to say this. To ba fe nkan te on se file. Àbí tó pé nkan tó ń ṣe ó lè ṣe ìpalára fún ilẹ̀ Yorùbá lókù àbí fún àwọn èèyàn. Ṣùgbọ́n tó pé mi ò confirm nǹkan tó ń ṣe ni pátápátá mi ní bá wọn ṣe wọn sì mú yàn sí wàá ṣe tiẹ̀ lọ́tọ̀ mi bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe ṣùgbọ́n èèyàn nílò láti máa bà nǹkan ẹni ẹlẹ́ni jẹ́ nítorí pé kò fẹ́ràn ẹni àbí bá tó pé kò fẹ́ràn ìyà tó kọ sẹ́ni ọ̀ ń ṣe gidi. I stopped here because that particular thing led him to prison just because people were saying it. GB Click said I'm speaking like I'm from Ile-Ife. That was not Ife dialect though. That was Yoruba Jumolo. I am from Ile-Ife. My dialect. I don't have Ife dialect. I wish I did, by the way. I'm even trying to learn these days. I'm trying to learn. You grew up in Ife? Really? I grew up in Ibadan. My father could speak the dialect. I can, if I listen to those who are speaking it. And that's why sometimes when I saw time I pay ago mẹ́rin, mani ago mẹ́rin ọ̀sán, lákòókò Ife. I'm doing that. I do that intentionally because I'm trying to also, but I like that. I like the dialect. My granny can speak Ife too. Really? Wow. Agoko Ife. I love that dialect. But I can't. But I into most one thing. I didn't even know I said anything to Ife. I'm from Latale compound. Grew up and lived in Ife too. Really. When you begin to mention compounds, it's about my so. Which quarters? Maybe if you say quarters, I will know Ogbon. But about so every but about so Ogbon not so much, but I can tell. Praise God though. The fact I can even tell that if as my kidney, that's a testimony. That means it's working. Because I'm trying to. I miss my dad. That man could speak. And then Ogben is proposing parties to appoint the INEC chair. I'm still wondering about his plans. How did you go there from Ife? I naturally gravitate towards anyone that grew up in Ibadan because I grew up there. Oh, be safe. I was born and bred in that city. Fantastic city. Ibadan has this very funny effect on, I think on many people, because my brother has said the same thing, but I experienced that as a young person. When I first started traveling, every place looked small. Like everywhere I went, everywhere looked small. I was like, like in my mind, I was like, that kind of mindset, but I never really voiced out to people, so that doesn't make them feel uncomfortable. But I always felt like this place is small compared to Ibadan, you know. But I'm glad that somebody heard Ife in my Yoruba. That's actually beautiful because I was trying to do. I'm trying to do it, but I didn't know it's coming out unconsciously. But yeah, you grew up in Ring Road. Wow. Ibadan gbole ogbole. Ibadan lo mo ọmọ láyípo. Ìbàdàn ọmọ àjòrò sùn ọmọ fi kí ni iṣẹ́ o ìkarahun ọmọ àfikàrahun fọ́rí mú ọmọ àjẹ̀gbín yó ọmọ àjẹ̀gbín jẹ́ karahun ọmọ àfikàrahun fọ́rí mú. Ìbàdàn ibi tí olè ti ń jàre olóhùn wọ́n ní ìwọ náà ṣe àgbè síbẹ̀ ọ̀hún wọ́n ní ìwọ náà ṣe àgbè síbẹ̀ ọ̀hún. Ìbàdàn, it's a blessed city. Yes, it is. Anyway, someone says, no wonder God saved Awolowo but allowed Akintola to pay for his atrocities. To be fair though, you know, the lie was what landed him in prison. And I want to say this, the only reason he was not killed was because he was in prison. All those things they say, they would have killed him. They would have killed him. I believe that God put him there to keep him from the danger that was coming in January of 66. The soldiers, the officers would have killed Awolowo in that coup. Am I sure? Yes. I am sure. This one I'm very sure. Why? Let me tell you one reason. If you read the book by Adewale Ademoyega, it said that they had a plan to release Awolowo from prison. Abi? Eshe. The day of the execution of the coup, do you know they didn't do anything in Calabar? They did not go there to release him. In other words, this is my own conclusion on that particular bit. I think they told Ademoyega, they told him that in order to get his buy-in, but not because they wanted to do it. Why? Because when it came to doing it, they didn't do anything, which meant they had no plans to do anything for him, which meant that if he was out, if he was like every other citizen, I mean, wait, they keep the Premier of the North, the Premier of the West, the major political party in the center, that's Tafa Balewa, they keep the court table. What's to say they will not kill Awolowo in the same Ibadan? That's why you think about it. I'm actually glad he went to prison. And most of the people that sent him to prison, the one that did not die was the one that ran away from Nigeria, which was Zik. It was an NCNC MPC conspiracy. It was only the ones who were Igbos that were not killed. Those who engineered the old treasonable felony thing that landed him in prison, it was only those who were Igbos that were not killed. The ones who were not were killed by the Igbos. Oh my show. You know, that's why I say you cannot be somebody's friend based on enmity for another person. No, you cannot be somebody's friend based on enmity for another person. You can't, because the day is done with that enemy, you'll be his next enemy. That's why I don't really send anybody that talks about Southern Alliance against the North. Like, what are you talking about? If you want to talk about the real issue. Let's talk about purposeful kidney. Not come and help me hate somebody because I want to also hate. No. The North and the East went for the West between 62 and 63. By the time they were done, the leader of the West was in prison. What did not realize is that the East and that they worked with to deal with the West was also planning terrible things for the North, and they executed it in 66 January 15, and they succeeded. So that by January 16, they then had all the power, which is what unitary system was all about. having removed the major problem in 63, putting that one in prison, now removing the power that be in 66, now you can have military, you can have Iransi, and nobody can question him. What would you say? Which is the fulfillment of the plan again. Sorry guys. One second, please. Sorry about that. What was I saying? I was saying that the idea of the East getting the North to work against the West, excuse me, I'm sure the North will be like, yes, now the British gave us this power. Now that you want to work together to deal with the West, let's do it together now. They dealt with the West thoroughly. But they needed the West to deal with the West, by the way, which is why we cannot afford to have something like this happen again. And Awolowo versus Akintola, which is what Tunde Bakare was talking about last week when he said a former governor in Yoruba land in a particular state, and we know the person he's talking about, had come to him to ask him to join ADC, and he said we're not going to have another Awolowo Akintola issue in Southwest again. That's what he was talking about. Because Tikuli Uba Pani to do Lake Pani. But here's the problem. Here's the thing. When they were done with the West, yes, they dealt with us. Yes, Papa went to prison. But guess what? The one who thought he was actually firmly seated on the throne was dealt with in January of 66. About 3 years after they dealt with Papa. Awolowo went to prison. Those ones were killed. Don't become anybody's friend because the person hates another person. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Far, 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 far. That's the beginning of Wala. The day that one is, the day you are done with that enemy, you will become his in corporate space. You know, it's human nature. So you want to protect yourself. All right. Let's get back into this. A few more things before we go. A peace meeting presided over by the Ooni of Ife, supported by some Obas and chiefs, I already read part of that, was held at the VIP Rest House Ibadan. I had insisted that all divisional leaders, ministers and parliamentary secretaries should be invited to this meeting, in order that they might for once know the truth of the real issues, instead of the lies which Akintola had propagated among many of them. Akintola strongly objected to the presence of these people at the meeting. On my part, I made it clear that I would participate in the meeting only if these people were allowed to attend. After a lot of negotiation, it was agreed by Akintola and I concurred after a lot of importunities that only ministers and parliamentary secretaries should be allowed to attend. Some carefully selected leaders of the party were also allowed to be present. Akintola made his case, which in the main was an attack on his burlesque and caricature of democratic socialism. I made mine and referred to his extreme disloyalty to the party and his intense desire to destroy me and my leadership of the party. In the latter connection, I referred, this was in February 62, I referred to the campaign in which he and, I'll take that again. In the latter connection, I referred to the campaign in which he had engaged among some members like Ogundiran and Oshuntokun that I was planning a coup against the federal government. The Ooni of Ife was in the chair. Who was in the chair? Ruled that this issue was I'll take that again. The Ooni of Ife, who was in the chair, ruled that this issue of an allegation of a coup should be deferred for discussion at another meeting. Anyway, at the close of the meeting, I had no doubt, and this view was shared by most, that the ugly monster brought into being by Akintola's withdrawal from Jos had only been scorched and not killed. The Obas, chiefs, and elders had found it difficult to be frank. At the conclusion of the meeting, Akintola was asked to accompany me home in accordance with Yoruba custom, but I decided to accompany him home first, since his house was nearer to the place of the meeting than mine. On entering his house, Mrs. Akintola did not hide her hostility to me. Akintola's first daughter, Dele, refused to greet me, but I ordered her to, and she complied. The entire concourse later moved to my house, where they were entertained. We were previously entertained at Akintola's place. Maybe next week we're going to talk about their two wives. And I'm going to use a book by Honorable Femi Kehinde when we get to that point. 9th to 22nd February 1962. Chief S.L. Akintola removed Mr. J.O. Odeku as a member of the marketing board. The reason given was that Mr. Odeku was not popular in his constituency. Mr. Odeku had been elected as the new Assistant Federal Secretary of the party in Jos. He had refused to return home from Jos with Akintola, which was the real reason for removing him from the board. Chief J.F. Odunjo, remember him, was transferred from Western Nigeria Development Corporation as an executive director to the Finance Corporation. Although there was no change in title and office, he was executive director in both. There was a reduction in status and salary. In private life, there was no love lost between Odunjo and Akintola. Chief Odunjo's son, Mr. Soji Odunjo, married Chief Akintola's daughter. There's a story behind that one. That story is in the book by Honorable Kehinde, how they actually got married. She was supposed to study law. Long story short, got pregnant. So I think that's where the problem started. Odunjo of Jalawi fame, yes. His son and Akintola's daughter had gotten together. I don't think it's a very good story. That's why I've been moving away from certain personal, things that have to do with even Akintola himself. But this case, essentially, the guy was supposed to study law in the UK, got together with one thing led to the other, and she stopped studying law. She got what I mean. Anyway, let's just leave that matter. I don't want to go deep into it. I'll just read from here because the whole thing was just a mess. Chief Odunjo's son, Mr. Soji Odunjo, married Chief Akintola's daughter, Ms. Omodele Akintola. The marriage was a failure. The feelings of the Akintolas were exacerbated when Chief Odunjo refused to return home from Jos with Akintola. I like how somebody quickly connected that to Alawi. Yes. Ababa obe oba. Ao ababa baba obe oba. Ao baba babe oba. Ao babe. Mr. Okay, Mr. Odekwabi. 13th February 1962, I held a meeting with ministers and parliamentary secretaries. The fears of ministers and parliamentary secretaries were allayed. Ministers were not elected to Federal Executive Council. Ministers who were not elected to Federal Executive Council were co-opted into the council by me. All seemed quiet for the time being. 19th February 1962, the governor of Western Nigeria, the Ooni of Ife, Sir Adesoji Aderemi, 1 second please. The governor of Western Nigeria, 19th February 1962, the governor of Western Nigeria, the Ooni of Ife, Sir Adesoji Aderemi, Oba Samuel Akinsanya, the Odemo of Ishara, Chief T.A. Odutola, the Ogbeni Oja of Ijebu-Ode, Chief S.L. Akintola, Chiefs Osuntokun and Ogundiran, and I met at the Government House, Ibadan, to discuss the allegation made against me. To discuss the allegation made by me against Chief Akintola to the effect that Chief Akintola was undermining my leadership with a view to overthrowing it. I had alleged that Chief Akintola was doing this by disseminating malicious information about me, that I was planning a coup d'etat against the federal government. I mentioned Chief S.A. Osuntokun and Chief Duro Ogundiran as two of the persons to whom he had spoken during his brief stay in Jos. He had boasted to them that if I dared to precipitate any crisis, I would be fighting from behind the bars and not as a free man. Plan from Baba Enisha. Please read this book. We'll take a break from Awu after this one, but if you can get this book, my march through prison, Adventures in Power, book 1. All plan from Awolowo. Yes, God kept him, but I also shine on trial. Anyway, this statement was made in the presence of Akintola himself. This was in February of '62. Okay. I mentioned Chief S.A. Osuntokun and Chief Duro Ogundiran as two of the persons to whom he had spoken during his brief stay in Jos. He had boasted to them that if I dared to precipitate any crisis, I would be fighting from behind the bars and not as a free man. Mr. S.R.B. Okoro, who was my press officer on trial at the time, reported to me as having heard this argument. I'll take that again. Mr. S.R.B. Okoro, who was my press officer on trial at the time, reported to me as having heard this statement directly from Chiefs Osuntokun and Ogundiran. Chief Akintola denied ever making the alleged statement to anyone. Chiefs Osuntokun and Ogundiran also denied that Akintola made such a statement to them. 26th February 1962, there was a meeting of party caucus at Development Corporation Rest House at Ibadan to give a final thought to the settlement of 9th February 1962. The matters of Mr. Odeku and Chief Odunjo came up. Chief Akintola was told to return Mr. Odeku and Chief Odunjo to their respective posts. Chief Akintola ignored that directive. Chief Akintola requested that the decisions of Jos Congress be rescinded. I rejected the request on the grounds that I and the others had no constitutional power to undo what the Congress had done. By the way, what he said earlier was that Odunjo, who was supposed to be his father-in-law, he removed that one from his post and transferred him because he did not leave Jos with him. It is what it is. Kubu says something here. I'll read your comments later, folks on YouTube. My moderator, yes, because we started a bit late, we had technical issues. I said I was going to read until 8:30 to make up for the time. But we're almost done. Just a few more things. Well, thank you for alerting me. All right. March to early April 1962. I arranged a series of meetings with Chief S.L. Akintola with a view to discussing important issues affecting both the party and the government. But Chief S.L. Akintola evaded all the meetings. He pretended to be busy either in Oyo or Ogomosho. During this, be arranged in order to discuss NIPC affairs, as the property corporation. A letter was written to Chief Akintola to this effect. He ignored the letter, but he persisted in disseminating the false information that the NIPC was set up to enrich my favorites. 6th April 1962. This morning, at my request, the Prime Minister and I met. I discussed with him the question of national government. It was my second initiative on the subject. Early in the year, I had convened a meeting of Obas and leaders of Yoruba land, among whom the propaganda for a national government was very strong. Akintola was there. The venue was the Western Hall, Agodi, Ibadan. I had made it clear at the meeting that notwithstanding any claim to the contrary, the Prime Minister or the NPC had not at any time sent me an invitation to join in a national government or coalition with the NPC. You know, if you look at my book here, it is marked. I marked this thing because I read the other book when they said Awolowo was invited to work with the North, but he said no. And I was like, the reason he said no because he considered them to be savages. Like, number one, he didn't consider them to be savages because he talked about, he said it several times what he thought about them, and that the issue for him was feudalism. But the other part also is that he was not invited to form party. Also to Wale. Anyway, where was I? So he said that at no time has the NPC, the Prime Minister or NPC, ever reached out to him or invited him to form a national government. In the circumstances, and since it appeared the Yoruba were so desirous of joining Balewa's government, the meeting should appoint a delegation to meet the Prime Minister to appeal to him to invite us. Akintola did not say a word throughout the discussion. In the end, the meeting unanimously rejected my suggestion and declared that it would be an act of self-abasement of the worst kind to beg for office. At my meeting with Balewa on this day, I complained that he had been undermining my leadership. He wanted the AG in his government. He had been discussing the matter with my deputy, Chief Akintola, but had never cared to talk to me about it, even though we saw each other from time to time in Parliament, more often than SLA and himself ever saw each other. I told him the AG would be prepared to consider favorably an offer for joining in a national government. I'll read that slowly. I told him the AG will be prepared to consider favorably an offer for joining in a national government if it was made to us in writing. I made it clear that whilst I would not be willing to serve in such a government, I would see to it that some of my colleagues did and that I gave the government my undoubted cooperation. Sir Abubakar apologized for his failure to discuss the matter with me. He thanked me most profusely for my initiative in raising the matter and promised that he would make an offer before long. After consultations with the Sardauna and his other colleagues, he was the Prime Minister. Was he talking about consulting with the Sardauna? Why? Because the Sardauna was the leader of the party. That's why. Having regards to my aversion for a national government, which excludes the existence of opposition in peacetime, it may be asked, why did I make these moves? In answer, I have these observations to make. Okay. At the conclusion of the Constitutional Conference in London in 1958, I had an overpowering feeling of foreboding. Her Majesty's government had refused to create new states in Nigeria, or at least break the northern region into two, before the advent of independence on October 1st, 1960. And I felt quite strongly that Nigeria had been sentenced to a long period of doom. I could not shake off this feeling for quite a time, and I thought it was wise to confide in my deputy, Chief Akintola, which I did. I confided in a few other colleagues as well. I'll do that again. I confided in a few other colleagues later. The foreboding that I had was that something untoward was going to happen to Nigeria. Whether the events would involve only the AG or other parties, only me or other persons, I did not know. That it would happen, I felt sure, but when it would happen, I had no inkling. By December 1961, I had no doubt that a big trouble was in the offing. If it came, I would need very sincere and courageous advisors who would not mince words whenever I sought their views. Accordingly, I had a meeting with Oba Samuel Akinsoya, the Odemo of Ishara, and Chief T.A. Odutola, the Ogbeni Oja of Ijebode. I told them what I had in mind and requested them to be my special advisors. They agreed. As a result, I consulted both of them on every important issue during the crisis until, quote-unquote, the dispersion. I guess I'm talking about when everything scattered. As I said, I had an overpowering foreboding in 1958. And completely forgot about. I'll say that again. As I said, I had an overpowering foreboding in 1958. After some 3 months, I shook it off and completely forgot all about it. But in December 1961, it revived in me with vivid freshness. As events unfolded themselves since the AG Congress had just, I was in no doubt that the foreboding was going to come true. At first, I felt there was nothing I could do about it. If the heavens fell over Nigeria, my family and I would not be the only victims. But later on, I thought I might do something about it. I discussed my idea with SG Ikoku. He agreed that I should take the initiative on the issue of national government. I also discussed with my chosen mentors, Oba Akinsoya and the Ogbeni Oja. They too approved. It's good to have mentors. When the Yoruba Obas and leaders decided not to send a delegation to Balewa, I felt there should be an end to any further initiative on my part. But on further reflection, I decided to grasp the nettle myself, and I did. However, the NCNC panicked as a result of my move. On 6th April 1962, Balewa and I were in the chamber of the House of Representatives. There was no serious business going on. I sent a note to the Prime Minister as follows: PM, could you give me an appointment this morning, say between now and 11 a.m. Obafemi Awolowo, 6th April 1962. On the same sheet of octavo paper, He minuted back as follows: Leader of opposition, what of now, please? T. Balewa, 6th April. When I read his notes, I looked in his direction. We exchanged glances. He rose from his seat. I did the same, and we then proceeded to his office, where we remained behind closed doors for almost 2 hours. What could we have been discussing? I had never previously had occasion to discuss alone with Balewa. The dyed-in-the-wool NPC conservatives and the rabid anti-Awolowo leaders of the NCNC put 2 and 2 together and set to work. In due course, it became clear that Balewa had abandoned his promise to me to invite the AG to join in the national government. I made another move later in the year. 17th April 1962. Chief S.L. Akintola made a brilliant speech in the Western House of Assembly in defense of NIPC. In the view of what later transpired at the Caucus inquiry, the speech is worth reproducing. Here it goes. Oh boy, speech you go. Let's start from this speech on Monday. This speech is long, but I wanted to read that part where he talked about the fact that he made a brilliant speech. I was trying to get to that point because I want to end on a positive note. And there's something I've learned from this man. When he writes in such a way that you can tell when he's wrong, but he also does this thing where he can acknowledge the good in you even when he's talking about the bad you've done. It's quite interesting. Shows a very great mind. We're going to continue from here on Monday. We should have ended earlier. Let's have 10 minutes, please. If you'd like to respond. Oh, okay, by the way, I have some things to read on YouTube. So let me read some responses. Thank you, Shaya West. Thank you. Meanwhile, let's do this. I'm going to put up the flyer for Redomi Republic. It's starting next week. It's a game show where that focuses on Nigeria and Yoruba history, politics, and culture, right? So that'll be next week. But from now, you can register to be a contestant. You can apply to be a contestant. The recordings will be on TikTok, but to be streamed on YouTube as well, so everybody can watch it. But it will then be repurposed for episodic format. So we'll be putting out the no, just hold on, please. Don't bring anybody up yet, please, so that we'll not be tempted to unmute. But the one who is up now just is okay. Let me show you something. Thank you, Mr. Olu. Okay. So, sorry, Shay, I'm going to take it down just for a bit. I'll bring you back up, please. All right. So, think you know Nigerian and Yoruba history. This is your chance to represent truth, test your knowledge, and earn your place in the history on the Redomi Republic live game show. Apply now to become a contestant. You can check out linktree/Redomi Republic. This link is on our Telegram channel, Redomi Global. And when you click on that link, you see the form. Then you can just fill the form. It's a Google form. The game show is starting on 24th October. That's next Friday, and from then on, every Friday we're going to be having game shows. All right, 2-3 participants. It's one participant, an individual at a time, but we can have 2, 3, or more, depending on the time that we have. So that will start on Friday. So if you like to contest, history, please go to that link, Redomi Republic, Linktree. About to start, please reach out to me because there will be cash prizes. the game show has a different format from what you've seen. I'll explain that once we start. The format cannot be explained until then. It will not make sense. So I'll explain what the format will be. So the very first participant or contestant will be the one to bail that cat. That will be on Friday. Okay. So that we cash prizes. If you'd like to support us, please reach out to me. Also, if you'd like to sponsor, maybe you have a product or a company or whatever that you think you want to push out, please. We're using TikTok like a studio, just like we're doing now. If you notice, the port that then go on YouTube, on Facebook, and different. That's the exact same thing that will happen with. But doesn't mean it's going to end here. So it's something that will, and then of course the format will be different, the structure will be different. I'm not going to be the only person on the screen. It will be through myself and the contestant, and maybe we'll have another, box for the questions so that everybody can also see what's going on. It's going to be very nice. If you've not seen anything like this before, I can assure you. And please support what we're doing, and that way we can get the, history, the true history, not the propaganda we've been subjected to for so many years. The true history will get to people in a fun way, an educative and entertaining way. So please support this. Thank you very much. That's Redomi Republic. Again, go to Redomi Global on Telegram and you find that link, or you can just go online right now and just type linktr.ee/Redomi Republic. You find the form there. Thank you. All right, let's have some reactions. Shaye West, please send your request now. Thank you. All right, so let me while he's sending his request, let me quickly read some things here on YouTube. But Igbo say it was Akintola who was sent. Sorry, Igbo say it was Akintola who sent Awo to jail. Akintola was definitely part of the plan, was part of the move, but was not the one that sent him. It was the government in power that did that. But like I always say, but they can't absolve themselves or the leaders of responsibility. That would be weird. All right. Kubo says, I heard that there are elderly Northerners who still weep when they remember the January 66 coup that almost wiped out their leadership in a single night. Yes. I heard Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka, the bishop, there was this interview where he was talking about it. Like, there are many elders in the north. People don't understand. That's when you concentrate on one group and you're shouting reparations, apology. I'm like, what's happening to us? Address everything. And when you're addressing, don't do this thing of, if I blame the East, I must also blame the West, even if the West did nothing wrong. In one fell swoop, the North lost both the Premier and the Prime Minister. And then they lost 4 officers. The West we lost our Premier, we lost 2 main officers, apart from others. The Yoruba officers that were killed in Sadauna's house, by the way, or Yoruba soldiers. A lot of Northern soldiers were killed. By the time the dust settled, it was about 24 people. Even Ademule Ogun's wife was not spared with her 8-month pregnancy. Nobody has ever talked about apologizing for that. I don't believe in all this childish pandering. The North feels that thing. Years ago, I was talking to a Northerner and I was like, even if that's the reason for the war, at least you've done it, like, let it go. Then I remember that it's not that they're not letting it go. It's that they remember what led to that event. And the things that the man says, please, if you can, please find the book by Sadauna, My Life. Forget about comparison, Awo and this and person. Just look at him for who he was to his people. And you'll be like, they lost something. But nobody talks about it. So you're right. Some people still feel that pain. But it's people that cause the pain that are crying the most. It's quite funny. GRO says, I will use that on our Ibo Alakoko. alákòókò yìí ọ̀rọ̀ pátì ni o báwa náà ṣe jẹ́ ọlọ́pẹ làwa action group ọlọ́pẹ tí wọ́n ní symbol tí wọ́n lálákòókò ní àkókò wọ́n ṣe pọ̀ wọ́n ní bọ̀ lákòókò. And I think that's all. Let's have Shaya West. Good evening, my brother. And then we'll wrap up. By the way, if you'd like to support, I'm going to put out the account details. Please use the bank details. That would be much appreciated. Thank you. Please go on, my brother.
Yeah. Good evening, boss. Otojo Meta. Well done.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So actually, I don't know if I can move forward a bit and ask questions about that, or maybe I should just hold it.
Well, let's see the questions first. Then we'll not know if we can deal with it.
Okay. So when Papa was imprisoned and the leadership fell on SLA, who was in the federal house as the leader of opposition? Then apart from that, what happened to the caucus of elders in Action Group?
Action Group broke. Action Group eventually, yes. So, sincerely, I don't know who was the leader of the opposition at the time. But what I remember is Akintola was still in the Western region, right? Then there was state of emergency, bringing in Majakodumi, who became the administrator of the Western region during that period of state of emergency. And then eventually, not let AGO, he's talking about the federal parliament. I don't know, was Adegbenro? No, Adegbenro wasn't in federal parliament, because Adegbenro became the premier of the region, which was why Akintola took him to court, right? And then AG broke into two. One faction went with NPC, the other faction went with NCNC. The one that went with NCNC were the ones who were loyal to Papa Awo. The ones that went to the north were the ones who started NNDP, Nigerian National Democratic Party. So the party broke into two, and then Akintola went to form his coalition with the Northerners, and then the Awo faction, Papa was in prison, but his own faction worked with the Eastern people, with the NCNC. They shouldn't have, by the way, but they did that. But let me check. I don't know I know Adegbenro became the premier in the Western region. And that became a huge case, by the way. Maybe we'll get to it in this conversation. But that question you're asking, let me see if I can find it in. One second. Let me see. David Adegbenro. Oh, okay. I'm checking over my way Adekoya. No. That's a very good question. I've never thought about it, to be honest. Federal Parliament. Let's see. Oh, yeah, David Adegbenro mi professor ni. But thank you for correct. Muslim baba yẹn now. Mo ṣáà rí. There's no official. There was no. I've never thought of that. I've never seen anything. There was no official leader of the opposition. So, following the Ashoka Group crisis in 1962 and subsequent defections from Awolowo's faction, his support in the Federal House of Representatives dwindled significantly. The Prime Minister subsequently announced that Chief Awolowo, there's a journal here that I think is the best. It might actually help us. The book is called Chief Awolowo 1952 to 1959. It's a journal that has several different articles inside. It says, with respect to the two premiers, we conclude with the doubt that Chief Awolowo had failed to adhere to the standards of conduct. This is from the commission, by the way. The Caucus Commission of Inquiry that Awolowo referred to. We take the view that there's no evidence sufficient in our view. In fact, you know what? Let me read this funny thing to you. It's crazy. Let me just go back a bit. Regardless of the involvement of Chief Akintola in the Action Group administration, the Caucus Commission of Inquiry consistently accepted Chief Akintola's denials, often at face value, and at the end put the whole blame squarely on Chief Awolowo's doorstep. As the Commission noted, with respect to the two premiers, we conclude without a doubt that Chief Awolowo has failed to adhere to the standards of conduct which are required for persons holding such a post. We take the view that there is no evidence sufficient in our view to say the same of Chief Akintola. They planned this thing. This was before the treasonable felony trial. This was all that time when it was being moved from Ibadan to Ikenne to Lekki to Ikoyi. That was around that time. While the report of the commission was being publicly debated in the print media, the Nigerian police announced on September 22, 1962, that Chief Awolowo was being put under house arrest in connection with an arms plot involving members of the Action Group. At the same two leading Action Group journalists, Bisi Onabanjo and Lateef K. Jakonde, were restricted to distant places in the Midwest area by the administrator for the strident criticisms of the federal government and the administrator of Western Nigeria, Senator M.A. Majekodunmi. As a consequence of several defections from the Awolowo faction, Chief Awolowo's support in the Federal House of Representatives had dwindled to 20 members from the 36 who had opposed the emergency resolution 6 months earlier, and the 75 opposition members elected in 1959. Consequently, the Prime Minister announced that Chief Awolowo would no longer be officially recognized as leader of opposition in the Federal House of Representatives. Therefore, the Action Group as the opposition party was reduced to only 20 members in the House of Representatives of 312 members. Thus, the Action Group became voiceless in the deliberations in the Parliament. It's sad. That was the end of beautiful era. Maybe one of these days we should study the politics of the First Republic. There's a book, I can't write the title now. Something First Republic. There's one on First Republic, there's one on Second Republic. I have both of them. Maybe one of these days we'll read them. Let me tell you something. If you deal with Yoruba people and you succeed, you have killed yourself and your generations. That's the point. It will pain us how when you do it, but you are dead. Not because Yoruba people will retaliate to, but Adabi Oja Jogunlo. Wá ṣeré ni. And àràǹkọ́tà kan gbé lọ́wọ́ nìyẹn. Tó bá dán kan wò kó tẹ̀lé kan wá ń tiwa, àkàn kú dànù ni. But as a race, Adabi já Jogunlo. Adabija Jogunlo. That thing they did, they destroyed Yoruba politics, like completely. And when I say they, I'm saying NPC and NCNC. And crazy enough, don't let me make a case for NPC. They say that they want to do what they want to do because of what AG did in their region. That's the whole argument that Sardauna put out in 1959. That because AG had moved into their space, they're going to enter the south and do what. But NCNC tí wọ́n láì gbé láì sọ láì jẹ́ pé wọ́n ṣe nǹkan kan fún wọn. Àwọn kan fẹ́ ṣàdá ọgbọ ẹ̀rú ni. Wọ́n dẹ̀ gbìyànjú. Mr. Abusu, do you have this book in your archive? Which book, sir? I hope I answered your question, by the way, my brother Ashaye West. But I don't even know what happened in that federal parliament afterwards. And I think about it again and again. If only we had stayed with just the region, but who wanted more for the nation? It is well. So we were so small in the house to go to a matter for anything. Nobody could be bothered. So what now happened? I know the crazy part. If you read the book by E.A. Ayodele, he mentioned that the East, you know the funny thing, the East and the North were not, at that point, they were now opposing each other. In 62, they worked together to destroy the West. By 65, they were opposing each other because of what happened in 64. Ah, man, this is good. So 60 was when they became Kiniabi. 61, 62, they planned to destroy the West. They succeeded with the state of emergency with Majekodumi in the saddle. Then they returned Akintola. By 63, they had census issues. 64 was the issue between Tafawa Balewa and Azikiwe. From that year was when Ojukwu started planning his own coup. That's between North and East. Now started having issues. In 63 because of the election, 64 because of the constitutional crisis. By 65 they were enemies. But here's the crazy part. When they decided to fight, to fight for them, the arena was not the North, wasn't the East, it was the West. They fought in this place and they did terrible things, but the North lost their men and the East took power. That is why when you see certain Northerners speak the way they do, just understand that they're coming from somewhere. I'm not trying to explain anything. I'm going to, because if I explain, it's going to look like justification. But just put two and two together from what I'm saying, and you will arrive at a very beautiful conclusion. Why West? Because we were weak now. We had already divided ourselves. They didn't choose the West because they were bad people. They chose the West because we were divided. One part to the North, one part to the East. That's why I don't like all this eléyìí ṣe báyìí mi ò fẹ́ má lọ ṣe kan tó o bá fẹ́ nǹkan tẹ́lẹ̀ ń ṣe ṣé tiẹ̀ ṣùgbọ́n má ṣe alátakò fún òun fílẹ̀ ní nǹkan tó ń ṣe jẹ́ kó máa bá tiẹ̀ lọ jẹ́ kó máa ṣe tiẹ̀ tí ò bá ti ní nǹkan tó máa palẹ̀ Yorùbá lára tó dẹ̀ pa àwọn èèyàn lára fílẹ̀ tó o bá fẹ́ bá ṣe má bá ṣe kàn máa ṣe tiẹ̀ lọ́tọ̀ but no ìjà yìí ni ìjà táwa ní láàrin ara wa ti gbẹ́ni àwọn ìwà burúkú àwọn ọ̀rọ̀ kò bá kún gbé èèyàn kan láti ibì kan ẹ̀ṣẹ̀ àtúnbẹ̀ sí padà ní nǹkan tó ti kú ní 45 pẹ̀lú ẹgbẹ́ wọn Odùduwà wọ́n bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí padà. So when those ones wanted to fight, they saw it was easy for them to, do whatever they want to do in the West. Somebody asked a question earlier. Please remind us what happened in 64. Mo ń lọlé aago mẹ́sàn-án ti fẹ́ lọ lù. But long and short of it is this. Tafawa Balewa, I think, won. Man, I'm tired. Azikiwe didn't call to form government. Tafawa Balewa then put Azikiwe under house arrest. Right? Used the military. Around that time, Ojukwu had a meeting with with officers of Nigerian origin, and he asked the question if there were conflicting orders from the if there were conflicting orders from the Prime Minister and the President, who should we follow, or whose orders should we follow? The other conversation, you find that what I'm saying right now, you find it in the book by Frederick Forsyth. It's called Emeka. The other conversation, and go on, relate that message to the GOC at the time will be Everard. Everard then spoke to the Attorney General. They came to the conclusion that if there were conflicting orders, they're going to have to follow either the Prime Minister or the Minister of Defense, who was Ribadu. So that's Tafawa Balewa or Ribadu. All of this time, the Igbos were planning to have a coup. If you read the book by David Ejo, Reminiscences, it was talking about how Ojukwu had recruited Wellington Bassey, Victor Banjo, and then they tried to get Yakubu Gowon and David Ejo. Ejo and Gowon then reported to General Foster, who then told Ojukwu and his Guinea they should not do anything. That's the reason we didn't have a coup in 64. If not, they would have started killing the nonsense they want to do in 64. And this is what Ejo said. Ejo said they were planning that coup because they discovered, apparently after the stuff that, again, you have to piece it together, after the stuff that Forsyth mentioned in 64, right? There's one more thing I have to, as another source I have to refer to. It's the forgotten documents of the Nigerian Civil War by Odia of Femon, that they had reached out to Azikiwe. Ojukwu reached out to him, that coup matter, and that Azikiwe developed cold feet or something, right? And he eventually now called Tafawa Balewa to form government, right? But there's no back channel anywhere. It's just hard copies that we sell. I don't have back channel. There is jeez, I forgot what I was saying. Azikiwe then called Tafawa Balewa, and they now decided to form a government. But in the interim, Ejo said the reason Ojukwu organized the coup in '64 was because they discovered that the president could do nothing. He had no powers. And I believe that the reason they discovered he had no power was because of what Welby Everett said to them, based on the discussion he had with the Attorney General in '64, that if they had conflicting orders, they couldn't listen to the president. They had to listen to the what was the word? The highest political office holder in the country, the highest elected political office holder in the country, was the Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa. And so because he was the highest elected, I need to put that word, the highest elected political office holder, who was the Prime Minister, they then discovered that, this guy is just ceremonial. That was why they were going to have the coup. Right? So that's what happened in '64. But the coup did not happen because of Foster. Foster stepped in, according to David Ejo. But what they didn't do in '64, they now planned it well in '65. And let me tell you this: Ojukwu knew about the coup in '65. How do I know? Because one of the coup plotters talked about it. His name is Wale Ademoega. He talked about it in Why We Struck. That's why when Igbos tell you to read Why We Struck, I wonder, have you read the book? The only reason they say go and read the book is because the author is Yoruba and was part of the coup plotters. They don't understand what the guy, they've never read it. Ojukwu was just playing them. But everybody will be fine. Anyway, may God heal our land. But Yoruba people, the lesson is not always good. Akintola is bad. Always good, by the way. Always like, God is good all the time. Always good all the time. Not like God, but get the point. Always good. But that's not the purpose. Akintola is not necessarily bad. I mean, there are bad things he did. I read some of those things. I decided not to explain anything, because if I explain, I will say things, and I don't want to paint him. Just hear what happened. But in his defense, I always like to talk about what he did with the Igbo thing, and that stuff is still important and relevant today. And then the other thing that he did that Papa was going to refer to is what we're going to continue from on Monday. So, when on 17th April 1962, Chief Akintola made a brilliant speech in the Western House of Assembly. So we're going to listen to the brilliant speech. And I should say this: one of the best orators that ever came out of this country was Akintola. He was a fantastic speaker. If you know what I'm doing, it's important to also acknowledge the good in men. Just like I said the same of Azikiwe. Azikiwe was also a fantastic speaker, but it was not a good person. Anyway, someone said Baba should have focused more on us and directed more energy towards Yoruba independence. Yoruba independence in 1960. He literally just finished fighting almost 20 years for Nigerian independence. Did I say almost 20 years? No, more than 20 years. They started fighting in '34. They got it 26 years later. You should not start fighting Yoruba. You know, when he threatened Nigeria with the Lagos thing, you know what they said to him? They're going to deal with Yoruba people. This was in 1954 at the conference. He was human after all. He couldn't have done all the things I wanted him to do, but he tried his best. Awolowo. Awolowo. Thank you very much for being part of today's session. If you'd like to support what we're doing, please use the bank details up here. That would be much appreciated. It takes a lot to do this. Also, Redomi Republic is starting next Friday. You can register now. Okay? You can register now. I know I'm talking about this a lot. I'll continue talking about it because kini mo ríran ó máa tóbi gan. Ó máa tóbi gan. Nǹkan tó máa ṣẹlẹ̀ mi tí fẹ́ sọ ń sìn bọ̀ ó máa tóbi gan. Bọ̀ ẹ wo kini ṣá o. Linktree/Redomi Republic. Please go there, register. If you'd like to support or sponsor, please reach out to me on Telegram or any platform. It's Busui Oris. It's Nigerian and Yoruba, politics, culture, history. We're going to learn history. Shout to your history go to school, but what is anything. We're going to learn the real ones, and it's really very good way to learn. Also, that's our new egbe. If you know, you know. Oh yeah, our prof. So yeah, so please go apply. It's not difficult. I mean, the form is not so, just basic stuff, right? And then we will contact you. I'll go. Masoyinbo is a fantastic show, by the way. It's a fantastic. But this one you can speak English. You can Soyinbo, and the question will be in area of culture and history and stuff, millionaire and all of those things together. It's going to be very big by the grace of God and with your support as well. So please, let's work together and make it happen. Thank you very much for being here today. I'm going to call it a day now. Thank you, everyone. Everybody who has liked and shared a show, thank you very much for your support. And everybody who gifted earlier, I really do appreciate it. Someone said you can't be a guest at Masoyinbo. Amogbo Yoruba kò lè tó yẹn. Èmi náà lè sọ Yorùbá kí n má ṣàmúlùmọ́lá. Àní ṣàmúlùmọ́lá kankan. Á sọ Yorùbá láti ìbẹ̀rẹ̀ dé òpin. Ṣé pé mo yín sọ́nsìn mi fi èdè Gẹ̀ẹ́sì kankan sí? Àná gbọ́ èdè yìí. Òyìnbó mélòó gan la gbọ́? Òyìnbó mélòó gan náà la gbọ́? Ṣé ibi tátàtà náà là ń sọ? A lè ṣe ìyókò ìgbésẹ̀ wá débẹ̀ sí i. Kí wọ́n lọ béèrè àwọn ìbéèrè kò bá kún gbé. I can love be Olúwa mi you are pọ̀jù. So I mean, if it's not gonna be a bad idea, to be honest, but and when we do this, it's gonna be my compliment around it. Táwọn èèyàn ṣe ń kọ́ láti máa sọ èdè Yorùbá láìṣe àmúlùmálà, wọ́n á tún máa kọ́ ìtàn, àṣà, òṣèlú, ti ilẹ̀ Yorùbá àti Nàìjíríà lápapọ̀. Kọ́dà máa ṣe pẹ̀lú kínní yìí ó máa délé máa lọ ṣe ń sọ akálẹ̀ akako. But you speak well, you speak good English. I do? Really? Tí mo ti ń ṣèdè Ifẹ̀ àbí mo ti ń sọ ohun Ifẹ̀ la máa ń pè ohun Ifẹ̀. My day is made though. My day is made today. Somebody actually said that he heard Ife when I was speaking Yoruba. He heard Ife dialect when I was speaking Yoruba. That's cool. I kind of like that. But yeah, tí wọ́n bá sọ Yorùbá tí mo bá fi sí òyìnbó kankan máa kàn máa sọ ti Ìbàdàn wọ́n máa rán Ìbàdàn díẹ̀ báyìí àní fi òyìnbó kankan la. Anyway, it's been a fantastic session today. Thank you very much. Look forward to this. Join this. Support it, please, and let's build something. All right. Someone says you speak English much better than 99% of Nigerians. Abba. Mi ló náà la gbọ́ tó tẹ́wà tó bá wọn. Great Ife, great. As long as it's also great Ife, I just started thinking about my anthem. More leave anthem again. I beg. Thank you very much, everyone. Been a pleasure being here. Thank you so much. We're going to see on Monday at 4 p.m. 4 if a time West Africa. You introduce Ekwengbere, which Mondole. Mike, so all right. Anyway, thank you everyone. We're gonna have the anthems now, the Nigerian anthem and the Yoruba anthem. So YouTube guys, thank you for your support and thank you for being here. I hope you had a great time. I'm going to let you go now because of copyright stuff, right? So we don't have to have copyright issues. All right, so we're going to have the anthem now. It's the anthems, the Nigerian anthem and the Yoruba anthem. Do have a lovely evening. May God bless you and May our land, may we make progress in this land called Nigeria, and may Yoruba land continue to grow. Gbogbo àwọn tó ṣáájú wa, ibi tán ti ṣiṣẹ́ gbé fún ìdí kan àbí omi, Ọlọ́run jẹ́ káwa ṣiṣẹ́ gbé ní tá bá débẹ̀. Ọlọ́run ràn wá lọ́wọ́ láti ṣe nǹkan tó yẹ káwa ṣe, débi pé tẹ́ pé wọ́n wò wá láti ọ̀run, tẹ́ pé wọ́n wò wá, inú wa máa dùn pé ibi tí àwọn aláṣẹ kò ṣe dé, àwa náà tún ṣe jù bẹ́ẹ̀ lọ. Ilẹ̀ Yorùbá ò ní bàjẹ́, Nàìjíríà náà ò ní dàrú. Kàdé máa kọ́ àwọn ẹ̀kọ́ yìí, nǹkan tó ń ṣe tó dá wà lálẹ́ káà náà rántí. Ìgbà míì àkàn fojú fo àwọn kankan, kì í pé ó mọ̀ nǹkan tó yẹ kó sọ o. Àkàn pé for the good of the collective, you take some things, and I'm hoping that our generation will do better, and where they made mistakes will make progress. Thank you very much for being part of today's session. I'm going to let the folks on YouTube go, then we'll have the anthem. Thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend. See you Monday, 4 p.m. West African time, 4 p.m. Ife time. I like to say that. 4 p.m. Ife time, West African time. And please go to Redomi Global now on Telegram and apply. We'll tell you more about the show. You're going to like it. Thank you. God bless you.